Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning in live today. Super long-awaited session that I know I'm excited for. I know Tim is excited for it. We are talking about transitioning from full-time employment to freelancing and everything that comes along with that, such as growing a freelance business, landing your clients, marketing yourself. Basically, I'm going to give Tim a brief introduction, and then we're going to start tackling these questions in the Ask a Question tab. So if there is a topic you really want us to dive into, make sure you've either added that question or cast your vote on what we answer. Again, this session might run a little bit longer than an hour just because there is so much content to cover. So if you want to stick around longer, we will be happy to have you here. I do want to give Tim a quick introduction. I'm sure every single one of you here know who Tim is because he is probably the biggest e-learning designer in this, in our space. But I want to show you something that I think is really cool and that is like really inspiring for me. I opened up a fresh tab here and I looked up e-learning designer, and you have a bunch of ads here. You have e-learning jobs, and the next hit is Tim Slade himself, the person who's presenting here today, answering questions. So if you needed any more convincing that Tim Slade is the real deal, I mean, this is saying something right here. So you've probably been on his site, but he has this nice, these nice illustrations, this very clean website. I pulled up some pages I want to show off really quick. He does custom e-learning design and development, which I'm sure everyone here is interested in. But he also does e-learning workshops all over the world. I think his book and a recent presentation was like translated to Russian, and that's not something I've seen before with anyone in our industry. So that just goes to show like how far Tim's reach is worldwide, which I think is really cool. Award-winning for sure. You can see them right here. And I mean, check out some of these brands that Tim has worked with. He's been in the industry for over a decade, and he's going to talk about his story a little bit when he comes on here, but just a very impressive background. So also, I'm sure you've seen this book, the eLearning Designer's Handbook, on LinkedIn, or I know when this second edition launched, it was like topping the charts on Amazon in these design categories. So Tim Slade is the author of this book, and he has a very well-designed portfolio with tons of beautiful work for you to check out after this session if you haven't already. So with all of that being said, I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and let's all welcome Tim Slade in the chat. And yeah, if you're trying to find, depending on where you are in the world, those Google rankings will be a little bit different. So mileage may vary with that.
All right. Thanks for having me, Devlin. My camera's getting up and running.
Yeah, it takes a second to load.
Usually.
Hey, there you are.
All right, there I am. Let me scoot over. So I'm there. Well, that was such a kind introduction. It's really weird to have somebody like point by point go through all the cool things I've done. So thank you.
Yeah, no problem. I'm sure, 1 minute introduction can't really do you justice, but no. I think people will get a lot of value from today's session. Do you want to give a quick, can you quickly talk about your experience transitioning from full-time employment to freelancing? Because nowadays I feel like people know you as the freelancer, but you had obviously a lot of experience before making that jump.
Yeah. My transition, and I've talked about this before, my transition into freelancing was kind of like 10 years in the making. I didn't just one day decide I'm going to quit my job and start my own business. And there are people out there who have done that and been successful, but I was really, really cautious about making sure I had all of my ducks in a row before making that leap. And I know we're going to talk a lot about that today. So long story short, I started freelancing during my nights and weekends, probably I want to say in 2012 or 2013.
Wow.
And that continued all the way up until when I made the leap in 2019. I quit my job at the end of March or early April in 2019. And even then, even though I had been working towards it and planning for it and saving for it, right. It was a scary transition to make, knowing that after that date, I wasn't going to be getting a paycheck in my bank account. And so, we'll get into all the details, but it was a really long journey over many, many years.
Right. Wow. Yeah. So I think it will be really cool getting that perspective. And then of course I'm coming at it from a very different space. I got into freelancing when I was still a student, so it felt lower risk. I wasn't already getting a regular paycheck, so I can always offer that perspective, because I feel like a lot of people who are transitioning into freelancing now, they are coming from that full-time background. So
Yeah.
I think it will be really cool getting your take on some of those struggles and, just that perspective. So
Yeah, absolutely.
cool. So we will start tackling some of these questions. I do want to just remind everyone here, I'm sure once we start diving into a topic, you will have additional questions about that topic. You can add them in the chat, but it would be best if you could add them in that Ask a Question tab so that people can vote on them, and we'll just answer whatever rises to the top. So, vote for what you want answered.
Good.
All right. So we will start answering this question from Jeff.
Hi,
He
Jeff.
asks, how do you guys manage or balance all the social media posting, the blog posting? Like, how do you manage all of that alongside your client work? He says, what is your time management strategy for when to post, when to blog, when to work on a project, etc.?
That's a great question. One of the things, and we've talked about this, Devlin, is it kind of feels like a rat race once you start putting yourself out there, creating blogs or being on YouTube or doing these live sessions like this. It feels like you're constantly trying to keep up because everybody is starting to do it to an extent. For me, when I started writing a blog, I started writing a blog long before I ever even started freelancing, and it was just a way for me to share some information or my experiences. I had no intention of where I was going with it. And so for me, one of the things I realized about having a blog or having a presence in the industry is that it is the way that I go about building credibility and authority and content market myself, my services, my experiences, my capabilities. And so for me, I view it as an extension of how I market myself and my brand. How you balance that, it's incredibly difficult because as you create a blog or as you create a YouTube channel or whatever it is that you're doing, if you're driven enough, you constantly want to improve upon what you're doing and you want to do better and better. And the higher the quality, the more you raise that quality bar, the harder it is to produce that content on a regular basis. And so I actually find myself, I have way more ideas in my head than I could ever possibly have the time to execute on. And so I try to, I used to do a lot of my content creation and writing when I was on planes because I was traveling so much last year. And since that hasn't happened, like since I haven't had that, my content creation stuff happens during my nights and weekends. So like my book that I just published, like that was, every night and every weekend.
Wow.
Trying to write that. So it's a struggle for me. I don't know if that's the case for you, Devlin.
Wow. And is that what it was like when you were working full time as well? When you were working on all that content, was it nights and weekends?
Yeah, the funny thing about that was it was during my nights and weekends having a blog and doing anything outside of my job. The funny thing is when I was working a full-time job, I remember when I wrote the first book, which I was still working full-time at GoDaddy at the time, and I was managing a team. I remember thinking, gosh, if I didn't have this thing I was doing 9 to 5 every day, I would have so much more time to create content.
Yeah.
And the reality is after I quit my job and I started freelancing, and even to this day, I still find myself going, gosh, I don't have enough time to do all the things I want to do.
Yeah.
That's because I have clients and projects and other responsibilities. And, I'll be completely honest. Like when I was working full-time, writing on eLearning or doing YouTube videos, it was kind of like a creative break from what I was doing day in and day out at my full-time job. And now writing and creating content, it feels more like a job than it used to. And so there's that added barrier that it really is work.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I can definitely relate to having way more ideas than you'll ever be able to actually execute on. I have like a spreadsheet or a list with just like so many content ideas. And I was even saying last night to Taylor, like my fiance, I'm like, I have all these ideas. It would take me like 6 months straight of working on this to actually bring all of this to life. So it's kind of just like a place I go and I plan maybe a few weeks in advance, and it's just a place I go and I'm like, what do I want to work on next? And sometimes those ideas will sit on that list for months, and then I'll realize maybe I'm not as excited about that as I thought I was.
Totally.
But yeah, I think my experience has been a little bit different. When I first started freelancing, I was kind of slammed with work. I was taking on a lot of like lower budget work, like
Mm.
hourly work, and I was keeping busy with these like long term, like 12-month contracts, like multiple of those, and then multiple side projects. So I was just like so slammed with work that first year, especially. I think I had time to do a few XAPI tutorials like around December because like I was working on some government subcontracting, so stuff would like shut down in December pretty much. So that's when I had some time to work on content. Um, but those engagements like were not great for me. Like I wasn't really seen as like the expert. I was kind of just seen as like this order taker, like pawn, and you know, good instructional design is what we say good instructional design is, not what like actually is good instructional design. So I was like, I need to get myself out of this situation. I'm not going to get too into it, but I was like, what's the best way to do that? Do I build an agency brand? People will take me more seriously. That wasn't the answer. It's building credibility. You know, you're going to get better projects, higher value projects when you're credible and people view you as credible. So for me, content was my way into that, you know, especially after I get built more confidence. I had all these tough conversations, freelancing conversations, and I felt like the lessons I was learning were just as much business related. I feel like the hardest lessons I learned were business related and not really instructional design or e-learning related.
Sure.
So I was like, yeah, so I wanted to start sharing that kind of stuff with other people, producing the content I wish I had years ago. And that started, that started making me feel like I had a purpose and felt much more rewarding to me.
Yeah.
And alongside that, bigger clients started reaching out to me, clients with bigger budgets. So what I've been working on lately, especially in the last 6 months or so, maybe even the last 4 or 5 months, is just being very, very selective about which clients I work with. So I keep my client work, like I'm working on with two clients right now.
Mm-hmm.
So I spend the majority of my time on the content.
Yeah.
So I think I said this in the last session. It's like 75% content creation for me, just because the workload is kind of low. Like if I had more of these like perfect leads with projects that paid exactly what I wanted, and it was like they want to do good instructional design, that would change.
Yeah.
But it's different when I evaluate clients now, and I'm like, is this project worth the time I would spend working on content? Could this content work for me more in the future? So I'm viewing the content as like it's not revenue generating yet, but that's like the direction I'm trying to go. So I'm in this space where I'm like experimenting with that. So I am devoting much more time to the content.
Well,
So
I think I have a former colleague that I used to work with, and she's the president of a small e-learning development firm. Her name's Amy Morsey. She's
yeah,
president of Artists in E-Learning, and I used to work with her and Diane Elkins, who owns the company. And one of the things that she told me is it's really the difference between working in your business versus working for your business, and you have to balance the two. And so, like right now, I'm doing the very opposite of what you're doing.
yeah,
I'm working in my business, doing client work. I'm juggling like 9 different clients for the intention so that I can financially
yeah,
spend less time next year working for clients and more time working for my business, strategically creating more content. So it's definitely a balance. You have to figure out financially where you're at and what you can afford to do and what makes sense
yeah.
long term.
Yeah, and that's a good point, because I don't think that's talked about enough. Like there is a very strong tie between being a successful freelancer and like personal finance.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's like you're saying, like I feel like I have the freedom to be more picky because I like grinded my butt off for 12 however long that was, 12 months or more, and I've been saving like it's like if you have like a year of savings in the bank, you can be a lot more picky about what you're working on. So
Well,
I
yeah.
think,
So when I made the leap into freelancing, one of the things that I said earlier was I was really cautious and conservative about it. So I waited until I had a year's worth of
yeah,
my full-time salary before I made the leap. And looking
yeah,
back on it retrospectively, no, I probably didn't need a full year's worth of salary. Now I feel good if I have 6 months worth of my pay in the bank, and it fluctuates. But the thing that I've learned about it is that, to your point, you know the more you can have in your your savings, in case the clients don't come knock on the door, which is rarely the case. But it changes the lens in which you view the projects that come your way. You're not taking on every client just
Yeah,
to survive. You're being more discerning about what clients you choose to take on or not. You don't
exactly.
have to.
And just connecting the dots on like why I delved so far into that is because I feel like, yeah, like working on the content and working on like the marketing stuff, and we can discuss that more later. I'm sure there are questions about it. Like, yeah, it gives you the opportunity to be more picky because like as you spend more time doing that kind of stuff, you're getting these bigger clients coming to you. So it's kind of like, it's like investing in your business, like you're saying. So
Yep.
when you get the bigger clients with the bigger budgets, it's like they're kind of like the more profitable projects are buying you more time to work on your business. So it's like this cycle where it can really complement, they can really complement each other. So
Absolutely.
cool. Alrighty. Thank you for that question, Jeff. I think we'll move on to this question from Matt Sesteda. How can I differentiate myself from the competition? Why hire a freelancer compared to an established company? And I think I've said a lot about that second piece. I even did like a YouTube video on it, but I think it's important that we dive into it here because it's something I struggled with for a while.
Yeah. So I have a couple of thoughts on that. Typically when a company is looking to outsource work, it's one of two things, either a lack of capability on their team to do it in-house or a lack of capacity on their team to do it in-house, or maybe it's both,
Yeah.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And so what I found is the organizations who know what they want and they just need somebody to do it to fill that capacity or capability gap, they will go hire a freelancer. And those are usually people who have worked in our industry and they understand that they can get what they need from a freelancer probably cheaper or more efficiently than they might get from a full-fledged e-learning design and development company. If you were, and there's nothing wrong with that. I used to work for those big full-fledged e-learning design and development companies, but what I know about them is that they have a lot more overhead. There's a lot more people involved and things move slower. And so how you differentiate yourself, I don't feel like I'm competing against those e-learning vendors that are companies with, project managers and design developers.
Yeah.
I think there's different people hiring those vendors versus who is hiring me. So how you differentiate yourself, it's really hard. It took me years to figure out what was my passion and how did it intersect with my skills and talents and how did it intersect with what was marketable in the industry. And so for me, what I realized was I'm really passionate about visual design. I love visual design and I like interactivity and I like e-learning. And what I learned is that, if you can do good instructional design combined with good visual design, that's my niche. And so it's everyone's personal journey figuring out their passions, their talents and skills, and whether or not it's marketable within the industry. That's time.
I think that's a good point. I think that marketability point too is really important, and we could talk about that. But e-learning, like that is like what's like hot. It seems like in like corporate training, or at least big budgets are getting devoted to it, for better or worse. But
Yep.
I think your passion for visual design definitely shows. I feel like that's how I've been able to find success in this field too. And coming into this field, I wasn't like passionate about visual design. I definitely didn't view myself as a visual designer, but it's something that I've been like learning as I go. And yeah, you just get better with every project you do, every UI you design. I feel like you get a little bit better. And especially looking at, work like yours, like Kath Ellis's, looking for inspiration on websites and all of that fun stuff, like just slowly training that eye for visual design. So that's good. I tell people like, yeah, if you have the visual design side, the e-learning development side, and that instructional design side down, it's like so great. Like, yeah, a company can come to you. You're one person. You have the efficiency of one person, and yeah, you can bring that project to life from start to finish without any compromises on those fronts.
Yep.
So obviously, there's a conversation to be had about like outsourcing and stuff like that. But I think as far as differentiating yourself from the competition, like I think there's a very healthy demand for people with that trifecta of skill sets or whatever you would want to call it. So yeah, I think if you have good work, portfolio, I don't think we touched on that, but a portfolio is a good way to differentiate yourself from the competition because I'd say that's how you're getting evaluated in a lot of cases. Especially when you're just getting started or making the transition and you don't have books and international workshops and all that good stuff Tim has under his belt.
Yeah. Well,
So,
the other thing I'll say too is like those three things, that trifecta we talked about, it doesn't have to be visual design. You have
yeah,
to everyone has to figure out what their niche is. And so if you're an e-learning designer, you're good at instructional design development, but maybe that third niche is accessibility. That's a huge
yeah,
thing that's blowing up, or micro learning, or working for nonprofits, whatever the case might be. And not saying you need to go down the
yeah.
route of focusing on a niche, but figuring out what are your skills, talents, and passions, and whether or not those are marketable. That just takes time to figure out as you work on different projects and different clients, and you start asking yourself, is this what I want to be hired for in the future? Yes or no? And then you continue honing that and how you market yourself.
Yeah, good point. Yeah, so it seems like that instructional design, like e-learning development, like that seems to be like the most common like need for e-learning freelancers at least.
Sure.
But
Yeah.
then, like you said, I mean, in this field, yeah, if you dive into visual design, if like me, I'm diving into XAPI, which is just some JavaScript. I know Melissa Milloway does a lot of like UI UX stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Like when you like those skill sets, like within this field, you're being evaluated against everyone else in this field with that skill set in a lot of cases. So if you really like UI and UX and you're comparing yourselves to like these UI and UX designers on Dribble who are doing like world-class work and like presenting like Adobe Max, you don't need to have been doing UI UX design since you were like 10 years old. Like,
Sure.
Obviously just an example, but
Yeah.
I guess my point is it's easier to get noticed for these more unique skills in our industry. And I think, and it makes sense because it is such a interdisciplinary industry. So it's just easier to stand out.
Yep.
Yeah, cool. Alrighty, thanks for that question, Matt. Okay, a question from Jesper. What are the fundamentals that need to be in place before you can start freelancing as an e-learning designer?
Oh, that's a good question. I think I have my opinion on it, and different freelancers have gone different routes. And this is my experience, my opinion on it. For me, as I was thinking about what ducks I needed to have in a row before I could make the leap into freelancing, it was really, I'm going to say three things, but it might be more or less than three. So let me go through them first and we'll count. So the first thing was having an established brand, something that was recognizable, that when somebody said my name, in our industry, they knew who I was and what I did for a living. And so developing a brand around yourself is perhaps the thing that takes the most time, because you need to have a way to distribute your brand on a blog or a website, and you need to know what your brand is and what you want to talk about. So for me, again, figuring out, it's that same thing with the niche and the passion thing and what's marketable. The more you blog, the more you go talk at conferences, the more you do things like this or share things on LinkedIn or Twitter or whatever the case might be, the more you'll start understanding what your voice is and what it is that you want to be talking about in the industry. And all of that contributes to you building your brand and your name recognition. I spent like 10 years doing that before I felt I had a brand worthy enough of making it into full-time freelancing. Beyond that, your finances. Like I said earlier, I had a year's worth of my pay in the bank account before I felt comfortable making the leap. Not everybody is able to do that, and that's okay. You have to figure out what, maybe you only have 6 months. There's some people I know who made the leap and they only had 3 months worth or 3 weeks worth of pay in their checking account. I would never do that. But that worked for them. And as you're figuring out what the biggest thing I tell people is like, figure out what are the obstacles that are in your way that are preventing you from quitting your job and being a freelancer, and get them out of the way. So if you have debt, get debt out of the way. I know that seems hard, but let me give you a great example. The 2 versions of the book that I wrote, the LinkedIn learning courses that I do, the online courses that I built, I haven't seen a dime of that in my bank account. All of that went to pay off student loan debt over the past 4 years. And so, things like that, I do it because I want to share my knowledge, but I'm doing it so that I can get obstacles out of my way that would prevent me from being successful in the future. So whether it's your current employer is not going to support you and, potentially moving into freelancing, which we can talk about later, or your finances, you have to figure out what obstacles are in the way and figure out how to get them out of your way, which is going to be hard for each individual.
Nice. Yeah, I think you approached that pretty holistically. Those are important things. It's not what you typically see. And again, like Tim made the leap. Like you were pretty much guaranteed success. I know it didn't feel like it, but having the personal brand you had and like having in place, so like what you had in place, like I don't know. I mean, hindsight is 2020, but it's like,
Sure.
yeah, personal brand. Like I just started really experiencing the effects of that this year. I can't imagine, having built that up over 10 years. And again, I started freelancing without much of a personal brand. Again, I did a few XAPI tutorials, but I was getting stuff from LinkedIn, people just finding me from keywords and stuff. People weren't finding me by word of mouth or from my content. So
Mhm.
I guess my point with that is you don't need to have this, people don't need to say your name and know who you are for you to freelance successfully, but the quality of projects you're going to have access to may be much lower. Like that first year, I was doing subcontracting work because that's all I was trusted to do because I didn't have that much credibility or brand. I had a master's degree or I was earning one and that's about it. So, and again, my portfolio is what was working for me. But yeah, the
Yeah.
personal brand part I would say is very important. It's a very worthwhile place to focus your efforts as a freelancer. And obviously we could probably do a whole session on personal branding, but every touch point, everything you post, even in a chat on a live event like this, like your name attached to that, like that's your brand. You're building your presence and people are going to have some feeling or impression based off of whatever it is that you're doing. And I think that's what Tim is talking about. When you grow your reach and get more exposure and people start knowing who you are, the opportunities that can come up, like it just kind of grows exponentially. I feel like when people, I need a freelance e-learning designer. Oh, Tim Slade, he's an award-winning freelance e-learning designer, like your catch line. So
Yeah.
I think that's important. I would say it's not 100% necessary, but I would say it's probably one of the best areas you can focus your efforts if you want to be successful freelancing long-term.
Yeah.
So
I'll
good.
add to that I think, it's easy for me to look back and go, oh yeah, just go self-publish a book or go partner with LinkedIn and make courses for LinkedIn or start speaking at conferences. And
Yeah.
one of the things I have to remind myself of is that people's perception of being able to do that, depending on where they're at in their career or how they view themselves, that might just seem totally out of reach for them. And to your point, Devlin, it doesn't mean you have to go do all of those things. But my goal when I decided to make the leap was when I wanted to leap into freelancing, I didn't want to just survive. I wanted to thrive.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
so for me, like I said, I probably, looking back on it retrospectively, I probably could have quit my full-time job and started freelancing back in like 2013,
Yeah.
2014.
Yeah.
But I didn't want, my goal wasn't to just survive. I wanted to thrive as a
Yes.
freelancer.
Good point.
So, yeah.
Yeah, and that's exactly how I felt that first year. Yeah, I felt like I was surviving, getting the work done, trudging through it, but I knew I wasn't spending time building my business. I'm like, I don't want to be trapped in these kind of contracts forever. And it's like you're saying, but yeah, I
Yeah.
didn't view it so succinctly. It's like, yeah, I want to thrive. I want to have the freedom that I pursued freelancing for in the first place. I don't want to feel like I'm working multiple full-time jobs. I want to be able to pick and choose. So
Exactly.
that's a great point. I just want to catch up on the chat really quickly. Miranda said it was helpful for me to backward engineer a digital learning experience. So I think Miranda's a lot of people when they're learning the skills required to be a freelancer. And I think that's another way we could take this question from Jesper is look at a learning experience and then in your tool of choice, try to rebuild that, try to recreate it. I think that's great advice because that is the best way to learn these tools is to do projects. So that's good advice, Miranda. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Theodosis asked a question about your brand and personal brand versus like if you've already built up a named brand. I added that question to the question queue. So if you want to see that answered, everyone, make sure you vote on it. I want to make sure we get through the ones that were upvoted the most. Okay, Nicole, I don't pronounce her name very well. Do you know how to pronounce her name? Nicole Papianu? Marina said she's a great person to follow. She's very transparent about her journey. People seem to like the idea of a personal branding session. Cool. All right. So let's dive back into this question. Yeah, about building. What about just to make sure we do this question justice? What about the skills that need to be in place before freelancing? And I know this is a tough question because obviously e-learning designer, like you need the e-learning development skill set, the instructional designer skill set, the visual design skill set, some sort of UX skill set. And some people will say, just whatever skill set you do have of those, you can learn the other ones, or you can just outsource it. obviously you need a bit more capital, you need a bit more industry understanding. Like that's an undertaking all on its own. So if you can learn the instructional design and the e-learning development skill sets, I think that will make you hireable. So, learning objectives, strong writing, how to storyboard, know a tool like Articulate Storyline, and have some sort of like graphic design understanding and know how to pull graphics from other places and maybe modify them, but you don't need to be like designing visuals from scratch. That's my take on it. What about you, Tim?
Yeah, I mean, besides all of the skills in order to do our job that we do as e-learning designers, whether you're in full-time or freelance, of course, you need to know all of that. Instructional design, UX design, whatever authoring tool. I mean, in the world of freelancing, I mean, the biggest skill is understanding how to talk to clients differently than you would talk to an internal stakeholder. The thing about freelancing compared to being an internal employee is that there isn't a power dynamic that you might experience. There isn't the same type of power dynamic you might experience as an internal employee. And so, I can tell my clients, no, that doesn't work for me, or that's not what we agreed to. And I don't need to worry about the repercussions of it because I don't work for them. We're working together. And so the relationship's different, and you have to understand how to navigate that and understand from a business standpoint how to talk to those clients. The other thing that you mentioned, what was it? You were talking about, oh gosh, I can't remember what it was.
Was it about the skill set? Oh, outsourcing.
Oh, and outsourcing. Yeah, my take on that is, maybe I'll say this to my own detriment. I don't yet currently I don't outsource anything that I can't do myself. Because I feel like in order to make sure I get the right thing from whoever I'm outsourcing it to, I need to be able to describe exactly what I want so that I'm protecting my bottom line and how much time they're spending on it. And I take a lot of pride in being able to do everything that I do, my website, my book, the design of my book. That's all me doing that. And so, and maybe eventually I need to change my attitude on that. But I don't outsource anything that I can't do myself. If I'm outsourcing it, it's for the sake that I've realized that generating closed captions or editing audio is just not worth my time anymore.
True. Good point. About your first point, I think that's really important. And I think that's hard for some beginning freelancers to understand that, you are a business. Like, there isn't that power dynamic. When I was starting out, like I was treated like a full-time employee sometimes. That power dynamic did exist. And because I was naive, mistakes I made in those early conversations, like I let that power dynamic exist. And then I was in for I suffered because of it for a year because it was like a year-long contract. Yeah. So you need to really be like your own advocate. I feel like the best way to learn this is by experiencing it. But again, I'm coming from I'm happy to get some work. I'm a freelancer. I'm happy to be making some money, and very tough lessons were learned. So you definitely need to be aware of your boundaries. You need to set clear boundaries. And if you have clients who start disrespecting those or pushing those, you need to address them like immediately, or it's not going to go down a pretty path, and you're going to get resentful and just no good. So
and it's hard because so many of us who've been working in corporate America, it's so ingrained in us that the way we interact with people are based on some arbitrary hierarchy about, oh, that person has a VP title next to their name, so I have to adjust how I talk to them. And so now that dynamic doesn't exist anymore, don't get me wrong, I still struggle with it. I still have to remind myself, oh yeah, they can't come back at me during my performance review because I'm not getting a performance review from them, or you know what I mean, or they're not going to go tattle on my boss because I'm the boss, So it takes time to rewire your brain and realize that you have to remember this is a business transaction, and because of that, you have to be really objective, and you have to expect objectivity back from them. And when it goes outside of being objective or out of business, then you have to call it out.
Exactly. Yeah. Because sometimes they won't get objective. People's emotions will get brought into things. They'll say emotional things that aren't fair. And I've been in those situations, and I say, I'm sensing some hostility, or I'm sensing some aggressiveness, and just addressing it, and just transparency, I think is important because,
Yep. Agreed.
Cool. Good points. Yeah, I feel like I wish I would have heard this a few years ago, but cool. Good answers. We spent a while on that one.
Yeah.
So there's a lot you need to in place when you're starting, it seems. But okay, we have this question from Jen. Are there any opportunities for passive income as a freelancer when the work is slow?
Oh my gosh,
Good
yeah.
topic to get into.
Yeah, so that's a great point, because that's one of the things, going back to the previous question, one of the things that I was very conscious and intentional about setting up for myself was multiple sources of income, so that when I did make the leap, I didn't have to rely on one particular thing. So for me, that involved writing and self-publishing a book. That's a passive source of income.
Yep.
Working with LinkedIn Learning, that gives me income. I do some guest blogging. I do the Ask a Trainer YouTube series with ATD. That's some passive income. Now, well, I guess it's kind of passive income. And then I created online courses. That's passive income. So what I think is important, in addition to the passive income, which is one way to diversify your revenue, is you have to figure out all the different ways that you can capitalize on you and your experiences. And so if I were just relying on custom development, not only would I not be happy, I would be burnt out,
Yep.
and I probably wouldn't make as much money or be as financially secure as I am. And so when I made the leap into freelancing, the book, the online courses, diversifying my services into workshops or consulting, in addition to the custom e-learning development, the beauty of doing that is it makes it so that you don't have to rely on any one single client or any one single source of income. And so I was telling Devlin earlier before we got on, I had to part ways with a client this week, and it wasn't fun, but I'm not worried about it financially, because I'm not just 100% dependent on that one client or that one source of income. And it's kind of the misconception that I think a lot of people have about freelancing, is that it's less secure. I feel way more financially secure than I ever did in my full-time job, because that was my only source of income, and there was nothing stopping them from firing me tomorrow. And so in a weird way, by diversifying, not in a weird way, it's very obvious, by diversifying my income, I feel so much more financially secure.
Great points. And yeah, you're a big inspiration for me on the passive income front, along with others in the design space and stuff who I see just killing it with selling digital products, YouTube revenue. I don't think you mentioned that one, but I know your YouTube channel.
Yep.
Yeah, so you really have that figured out to a degree, and I know you're always working on it. And I'm glad we got into this, because that's part of the reason why I'm spending 70% of my time right now working on content, because I'm trying to build these passive income opportunities. I've been trying to build my brand so that then whenever I do launch a template or a paid digital product to teach you a skill that's useful in this field, like, so that I have an audience who actually knows me and trusts me, who will feel comfortable purchasing a product or something like that from me. So that's like my experiment right now, and that's what I'm working towards. So hopefully a year from now, I'll have a better answer, more like Tim's. But
well, and the good thing is by doing it, it comes back and it pays you in different ways. You create the book or the course, or you're doing the crowdcast, and it continues to help you. It compounds by continuing to spread your brand and your authority, and then also ideally you make some income off of it as well.
Exactly.
And I think for a lot of folks, they get uncomfortable doing that. But the reality is part of having that business mindset as a freelancer is viewing yourself and what you offer to the industry as a product. Sure. It doesn't mean you have to be really skeezy and markety about it. You can go on LinkedIn and see that when people are doing that, but you also have to balance it by thinking of yourself as a product and what you can offer and how you get that in front of people.
Exactly. Good point. I do want to catch up on the chat a little bit here. Let's see. I'm seeing some questions. Those were added to the queue. Yeah, a lot to learn when you're breaking into the field. That is true. People are relating to making the mistakes in the beginning, Miranda says. Giannina, setting clear boundaries when I was an ID at a university was like blasphemy. How dare I expect my colleague to have their course content ready before they meet with me? Yeah, it can be tough, but fortunately as a freelancer, you have a lot more freedom. And if the client isn't respecting your boundaries, then you wave goodbye and you support the clients who do value you and your time and your expertise.
Well, and the difference of that comes from the fact that when you work internally, that stakeholder, that business partner who's not respecting your time, they don't feel the cost of it. When you're a freelancer, if they're going to spin your wheels and waste your time,
Oh yeah, it'll be
literally you can put a dollar amount to it.
exactly, and that's what I do. Yeah, oh yeah, I can do that, and it'll be X amount more dollars. So very good point. You can make it worth your while to work with that SME or whatever it is. Miranda says, I think there's potential for passive income in XAPI templates. That is interesting you say that, because that's what I'm working on. So that's cool. All right, good. We're caught up on the chat. I see the question number just slowly rising, so we'll see how many of these we can get through. Okay, I have a question from Christina here. What terms of conditions do you use with your clients? What is important? Copyright, delivery of content, number of reviews, etc. Obviously we could do an entire session on this question alone too, but maybe we can touch on some of the big things you would want to see in a contract.
Well, gosh, the truth is my contract and the contracts I use evolve because I'm constantly learning about what works, what doesn't work with different clients. And I go, oh, I'm adding that to my statement of work next time or whatever. So for me, the big things are, one is a single point of contact. I don't like being tossed around to 15 different people within an organization. So I have a single point of contact clause in my contract. As it relates to copyright and the source files, it's my belief that they're hiring me to deliver them something. So at the end of the day, they get everything. They get the source files, they get everything. I feel like it's a little unfair. And some companies do this where they'll say, we're going to build it in Storyline, but if you want to make edits, you have to come back to us, and then we're going to charge you $10,000 to change a sentence. I think that's skeezy and unfair. So at the end of a project, they get everything from me. And at the end of the day, more often than not, when they need to make updates, they do come back to me because I designed such a beautiful course that they would rather have me touch it than them touch it in-house. So I give them everything. And then a really, and this varies from project to project, but having a really tight description of what the scope of the project is, how many review cycles you have, how do you handle out of scope stuff. Those things are incredibly critical because that's what you fall back to when they start going crazy. And I've learned through a lot of really bad experiences what sort of things have to be in my scope of work. So I define how many review cycles there are, what is in scope and out of scope at each review cycle for each stage, and how that relates to my invoicing. And so I typically invoice, depending on the project, I'll invoice in thirds. And so I'll say 1/3 up front, 1/3 after this milestone, and 1/3 at the end. So I could go on and on, but those are the big ones for me.
Nice. Yeah, those are important. So yeah, the payment schedule, similarly depends on the project, but it's either 50, for me, I do 50% up front, 50% before final delivery of the files, just to make sure you get paid before you're handing that stuff off. Or I'll do 50, 25, 25 even. So that's good to have in there. Again, in the beginning when I was subcontracting, the clients will say oh yeah, you'll get paid when we get paid. We do a net 30. So, obviously mileage may vary depending on what kind of client you're working with and what kind of, what kind of power you have in that relationship, I guess I should say.
For sure.
Some of the other stuff, very important, especially because I do a lot of my stuff fixed price. I know you do something similar. It's kind of fixed price.
Sure.
But yeah, I mean, for me, it's even more important because I don't include an hourly rate. I have to make sure the scope is defined very well. Will narration be included or not included? Are these graphics going to be custom? What type of interactions will be included? How many interactions will be included? So I try to imagine that final product from our scoping conversation or whatever as well as I can, and make sure I get that in writing, no mistakes. And sometimes people will forget, and down the line they'll be like, oh yeah, well let's get this narrated, and I'll be like, oh no, we opted not to go with the professional narration. And it's really important being able to point back at the contract and say that. And my first year, I learned this lesson pretty early. I was obviously in over my head with contracting. Like I said, I was just happy to get work. Oh yeah, I'll do this branching scenario, whatever. And then it's developed, and then at the end, the client's like, "Oh yeah, can we add narration to this?" And then I'm like, "Oh no, I don't think so. We'll have to redo our whole approach to the course." And I convinced them away from it. But that would have been a nightmare if they're like, oh no, we need narration, we're not paying you unless we get that. I wouldn't have had anything to fall back on. So it's very important defining that type of stuff in contracts, I would say. And then review cycles, of course. I mean, I've been in contracts, and maybe this will happen to others if you aren't very careful about your contracts, but review cycles can just go on and on and on. They get passed over to different teams, different departments, different continents where there's different people to review it. And I've been on contracts where you're reviewing stuff that was changed in the 3rd review cycle, and in like the 10th review cycle, you're changing it back to what it was. So it can get kind of absurd at times. So you really need to define, like Tim was saying, reviews. We're going to do a review cycle on this part of the deliverable. Here's what can be changed. And then I say, once we move past that, this is considered final. Any changes to it, I'll give you a new quote to make that change.
Yep, absolutely.
Cool.
Good.
Alrighty, let's move on to the next question. We have another question from Jeff. Jeff believes that to be successful as a freelancer, you have to be good at marketing yourself. What are your go-to resources on digital marketing, and how did you get so good with your website building / design and SEO? Great question.
Faking it until I figured it out. I mean, like, so when I first built my website, I built it in one of those, drag and drop WYSIWYG website building tools. And then I realized, oh, this sucks. I really want to do something better, more custom. And so I spent probably a good month or two, like, watching YouTube videos on how to install WordPress on a hosting account, and like literally just stumbling my way through it. That's how I figured it out. I stumbled my way through it. I faked it until I figured it out. And even now I still learn things all the time. The same thing with SEO. The thing for me was I wanted to increase my SEO ranking. And so I Googled about it and learned about SEO. And so it's no different. This is the thing, like, I want everyone to walk away with is that, like, anything that I've done, anything that you listed at the top of the call, writing a book or creating online courses or having a website, like, if I can do that, anybody can do it, because I excuse my language, I just had to figure it the fuck out. Like, if I wanted to do a book, I had to figure out, well, how do I do that? And let me just start doing it. And the same thing with the website. Like, it was just a lot of Googling and trial and error. Because I know nothing. Like, I couldn't code myself out of a paper bag. I would rather die in that paper bag than have to learn how to code to get out of it. So, like, I literally just figured it out.
Yeah, I think that's good advice for a lot of things. How do I do this? Figure it the fuck out.
Figure it the fuck out. Yeah.
So, good point. I do have some actual resources to share, especially on the SEO front.
Because I don't.
There's this YouTube channel because again, I had to build my SEO like very rapidly, because I wanted people to find me on Google. So I was like, I dove very deep into SEO to kind of figure some stuff out. My homepage, devlinpeck.com, that doesn't rank very well. I haven't figured that out. But the content, Google wants to show people the content that they're looking for. So I did a lot of research into like those signals and keyword research to figure out like what are people searching for and what are people looking for when they search for those terms. And just really understanding how the Google algorithm works. I think that's a good starting point for the SEO front. You need to know and again, they keep it very cryptic. They have like 400 like indicators, but there's really good, like this YouTube channel called The Income School. They have the best SEO content I've found like to date. So write that down or something if you want to have your content ranking. It's called The Income School. And I've learned stuff from them that have helped some of, like, I don't know if this is for everyone, but like if you Google instructional design, like that featured snippet is like from my How to Become an Instructional Designer article. I made those changes based off of what I found in one of their videos, and it worked. A couple months later, now I have that snippet over like Purdue University or something who had it before. So just examples like that. And they had so much stuff. They talk about how the algorithm works. They have these like long webinars, like everything you need to know about SEO. So that was a gold mine for me on the SEO front. And of course, like Tim was saying, I did research before. I generally knew how things were working just from articles and stuff I was finding, but definitely check that out.
Yeah, the other thing I'll say about that too is, there's a lot of specific techniques you can learn about keywords and how you tag content, how you structure a website. All of that will definitely help with your SEO if you really want to get into it. But at the end of the day, like Google is getting really, really intelligent in terms of discerning what content is valuable and invaluable. And so if there's any one thing you should focus in on is just providing good value content. So if you're
Yes.
creating a blog, like even if it feels ugly or you're building it on some really sad website builder that you found from GoDaddy or some other service provider, at the end of the day, it's about the quality of the content. And Google is getting so much better about discerning that more
That's
than anything else.
1000% true. Yeah, and the question again, it's about digital marketing. Both of our approaches to that, it's content marketing, and I think that's like industry wide in the digital marketing space. I think content marketing and maybe like email marketing. I know that's like really like effective, but that's still like a form of content marketing in my eyes.
Yeah, agreed.
Um, so that's what Tim and I are talking about, content marketing. And like Tim said, like the best way to succeed with that is to produce valuable content, for your like target audience. And I was very stressed out in the beginning because I'm like, my target audience are the people who are going to hire me, right? Like my target audience are these hiring managers who I know nothing about because I've never been one. So let me just write all these articles like about Gagne's 9 events and Addy and stuff to like show that I'm credible and show that I know what I'm talking about. That wasn't
Yeah.
effective. But
And
yeah.
oh no, go ahead.
Yeah, but when I worked on like XAPI tutorials that I struggled figuring it out and I knew and I was like adding on to stuff that I did find, I'm like, this is going to help people. Like other people are going to have this question I have. And then this like 10,000 word how to become an instructional designer article, it was, I had friends who were like, oh, I want to break into the field. And I'm like, yeah. And I had this conversation with them like 20 times with all these different people. So I'm like, I didn't even just put this together in one huge article and just put it out there for everyone. And then it found its way to the top of Google because people are spending much longer on this 10,000 word guide that's telling them step by step what to do versus, these other hits like what is an instructional designer and stuff. So,
Yeah.
and it's like you said, so Google has indicators for that. It's looking at how these resources are shared on social, because if you put something out that's actually useful and helps people, they're going to share it with other people that it's useful and helpful for. So again, that just builds your credibility, gets your name out there even more. And the Google algorithm looks at that. Where is this page getting traffic from? Is it being shared on social? Is it valuable in other people's eyes? Yep. So that was a great point.
And I think it leads to another misconception is that like folks like you and me are like cold calling clients or messaging, doing those annoying LinkedIn messages that you get when somebody connects with you to find clients. Like I don't actively do anything to find clients. I actively create resources for the industry and put that out there, and that in turn markets me and people find me. I have never once emailed a potential client to be like, oh, have you ever thought about working with me, or create ads about my services? And so one of the misconceptions that I think they have about freelancing is that you got to figure out the phone number for some learning leader at a corporate organization to maybe pitch your services. I don't do that. I don't have to do that. And so the content marketing for me, sometimes people think, oh, well, that's an optional fun thing. No, that's how I drive business is content marketing. And even though a lot of my content is focused on new instructional designers, kind of my thought process is the new instructional designers I'm reaching out to today and I'm impressing upon them today, 5 years from now, they'll be the decision makers who hire me.
Yeah.
So, it's an investment in the industry and it does come back to you.
Exactly. Yeah. That's where you connected that dot for me. Yeah. I started producing content for other instructional designers and e-learning developers because those are the struggles I'm familiar with. That's the stuff that I learned and I know how I can help people learn that better. So that's the audience I started focusing on. And then, oh yeah, I heard about you from one of my employees, or I heard about you from one of my students. Like that's been said to me multiple times. So
yep.
You're like one step disconnected, but that's a very easy connection to make. Yeah. So great point. Because again, that's something I struggle with. I'm sure people here are struggling with that. So good stuff. Good stuff, Tim. All right, we have another question. As a beginner in instructional design, how can I start building my portfolio? Big question. This is from Kanika. I know this question is asked a lot, and obviously we could spend a long time answering it.
So if you don't mind, I'll give my take on that. Sure. I think a lot of people mistakenly think your portfolio is there to showcase all of your work, and that's not the case. Your portfolio is to showcase the work that you want to be hired for, that showcases the best of your skill set. And so whether you have 2 examples or 3 examples, If it showcases your skills and the work you want to be hired for, that's enough. I went years with only having like 2 or 3 examples in my portfolio, and 2 of the 3 that I had were examples I created myself. So I went like 1 year. I have an example in my portfolio. You can go see it right now. It's on how to cook a turkey. I built that course because I didn't go home 1 year for Thanksgiving. So I was like, I'm bored. I'm gonna build a course in Storyline on how to cook a turkey. And I've been hired because of that. I've won an award for that stupid course on how to cook a turkey because it looks cool. I have no idea. So the biggest thing is just start creating stuff that showcases what you want to be hired for. And even if all you do is put like screenshots of it, it doesn't have to be the actual live
Yeah.
course. I don't have any actual live courses in my portfolio. It's screenshots and video demonstrations. Start simple and just start putting anything up.
Yeah, good point. And I know I could take some of that advice myself. I definitely need to do more curating in my portfolio. Yeah, good points. How can I start building my portfolio? Like from a practical perspective, yeah, I mean, get a website builder, learn the authoring tool you're using, work on your visual design skills. Like sometimes you can tell in someone's portfolio it's like their first project, but just keep iterating, get feedback on your designs, make sure you have some projects that can stand on their own, even if it's only one project to start, but make sure it's a project you're proud of and it doesn't show like, oh, this person's like an amateur who's still figuring it out. And maybe that's the case, but like, feedback, again, you don't have to build this whole hour-long course. I've seen some people do that and they like work their asses off for like a month straight to like put together this one artifact, when you could probably build a portfolio much more rapidly, like Tim was saying, doing screenshots, mock-ups, talking about how it like would work or does work, even though you haven't built the whole thing, but you know that you could.
And most hiring managers and clients really, because I've been on that side of hiring freelancers and hiring employees, they're gonna, if you have a website to your portfolio on your resume, that's the first thing they're gonna click on if they are have any value or they're any good at what they're doing. And then even when they get to your portfolio, they're really only going to look at 1 or 2 examples before they make a decision on whether or not they're going to move you on. So you don't have to have 100 examples. You only need a couple that really showcase what you can do. And it's a living organism. Constantly work on updating your portfolio as your skills evolve. It doesn't have to be a one and done thing.
Nice, good point. And the last thing I'll say about that is, for me, like, for a lot of my success was like directly proportional to the state of my portfolio. There was even a time where I had it taken down and I didn't have the credibility to do that. So my leads dried up completely. So I'd say if you don't have a lot of other ways or places where you're getting credibility, your portfolio is a very, very good place to focus on when you're starting to freelance.
Yep.
Cool. Okay, how do you manage, this is a question for me, just because I knew we want to talk about this. How do we manage job security as a freelancer? Is it more secure to have a full-time job? And I know we touched on this. Again, it feels much more secure having a handful of clients and a steady stream of leads than it does to have one job where you feel like you have to like, deal with a lot of this toxicity in the workplace and stuff, because that is your only source of income. So I feel like we touched on that a little bit.
Yeah, I think it's a perception of security when you have a full-time job, but it's no more secure than anything else. So, there is something freeing. There is something very freeing about knowing that your success is 100% on your shoulders. And how much money I make a year is 100% up to me. I could take on every client that comes my way and make a shit ton of money this year if I wanted to, or I could choose to make just as much money as I need. Like I said, it's about rewiring your brain, because everything about our society, especially if you're here in the US, everything about our society is set up for you to go work for a corporate organization and work there for 30 years and retire, with your $700 a month social security check that we're probably not going to get. That's how our system is set up. And so it's hard to rewire your brain to go, no, screw that, I'm going to do my own thing.
True.
So that's my take on it.
Alrighty.
It's cynical, but that's how I feel.
Good point. I realize we're at the hour mark, so we'll probably try to move through these next ones pretty quickly, maybe like rapid fire question answering.
Cool.
Let's see. Should you? Oh, this is a good one. Actually, I know you wanted to address this. Should you let your employer know that you're freelancing on the side, or should you try to keep it under
Oh
wraps?
my God, thank you for asking. This is my favorite thing. So yes, you should be, this is the phrase I use, you should be excruciatingly transparent about what you're doing. I have, when I took my last job before I quit at GoDaddy, when I was interviewing, I told them, when you ask me where I'm going to be in 5 years, it's not going to be here at GoDaddy. I'm going to be freelancing. That's what I'm doing. And I was very transparent about, if you're going to hire me, this is the baggage you get. I go speak at conferences. I have a blog. I'm writing a book. And, after all of that, for them to still hire me, then I knew this was a good place to be while I made that transition. If you are secret about it, you will not be successful because you can't freelance in secret. You can't content market yourself in secret. And so if you have an employer who's going to be insecure about what you're doing during your off time because it doesn't mean you're going to be there, then quit. Go find it. Maybe not just quit your job, but go work somewhere else until you find somewhere where you can be. There's somebody else in our industry. I won't say her name and I won't say where she worked, but she was recently working somewhere where they wouldn't let her blog, they wouldn't let her speak at conferences. She wasn't allowed to do any content creation outside of the organization. And I told her, I'm like, well, then how are you ever going to be successful if they're not going to support you? And she quit and got another job where they would. I know that's not possible for everybody, but
Yeah.
you have to be excruciatingly transparent about what you're doing, and that's another thing that we're programmed not to do, but you have to be in order to eventually make that transition. You can't do it in secret.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people are probably feeling refreshed hearing this, or maybe challenged by hearing it, because I see the stress that people deal with. Like, it weighs on people, like feeling like I can't talk about this on LinkedIn. I can't put freelancer in my title. Like, what are my colleagues going to think? And obviously everyone's situation is different. And in some cases this is valid, and you don't want to lose your job because you don't have other stuff lined up and you have bills to pay and all of that fun stuff. But I think that's a really good point, like long term. And if you are looking for new opportunities, like, it just sounds like, yeah, your stress levels will be like so much lower if you
Oh
can
my
find a company who's like, oh, who knows you're going in that like direction, and you can be transparent, and you don't feel like you're like living a lie at your full-time employer, and you're like secretly content marketing on the side. I can imagine that would be just draining. So
And that's the thing too. If you work, like, imagine working somewhere that didn't support what you were planning on doing a long time. That makes you question, like, what part do support anything that you're doing? Like, is that really a place you want to be working? And so, if you do feel insecure about what your colleagues or your boss going to think, excuse my language, like, fuck that. I just don't have time for it. And it is so freeing and less stressful once you're really, truly honest about what it is that you're doing and want to be doing. And if they support it, then Yahtzee, great. And if they don't, find somebody who will. And again, it's this whole like idea that we are supposed to be loyal to the big corporate organizations. Well, no, when are they going to be loyal to what we want? We don't need to, you don't, gone are the days where you're going to be working somewhere for 30, 40 years and retire. Eventually you're going to leave that organization. And so I'm just like, let's be honest about it, be transparent. And if you're going to let me be successful in my goals, then great. While I'm here, while you're there at that organization, give it your all, but know that they need to be supportive of what you're planning for your future too.
yeah, I think that's a great point. Again, I think I haven't heard that before talking to you, so I'm sure that's the case with others, but I think it's real. I'm glad we brought this up and that you addressed it.
Good.
Okay. I wanted to quickly look at the chat. I know we're running over a little bit. We'll probably run for maybe another 30 minutes max or so. We'll see how it's going. I think people are really appreciating this. They're really enjoying the transparency. They're saying, Nicole asked, are there cons to having a full live course? I added that to the question queue. I don't know if there's a quick answer to that, but great clarification about what a portfolio should be, Tim. D says, I love when instructors let me know they found my website. Starts a good conversation and shows they're interested in my work or their work. But yeah, I think that it's obviously very different when someone finds you, or they said, oh, I came across your portfolio, I loved it. I have a project I'd like to discuss. In the beginning, when I started getting people reach out like that, I'm like, oh, this is so exciting. I'm hopping on this call. They already know who I am. They already like my work. So it definitely changes the dynamic a little bit.
Yep.
you feel like you have more bargaining power and all of that stuff, because they want to work with you. You don't feel like you have to oh, how am I going to impress them? What am I going to do to make them want to hire me? So
Yep.
it definitely helps with that dynamic.
Yep.
All right.
Well, and when you do content market yourself and you're not dependent on you cold calling or reaching out, if they're reaching out to you, the credibility has already been established. You don't need to continue to sell yourself. So yeah.
Yeah. And I think Matt commented on that too. He's like, yeah, pay it forward and it'll come back around. And I think that's a good way to think about it, for sure.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, I'm seeing more questions. I'm also adding those to the queue. So vote on the questions in the queue if you want to see them answered. Probably not going to get through all of these, but we'll see how far we can get.
Okay.
Fakar, how should I quote so that a client won't run away? And then what would a quote be for storyboarding a 1-hour course? I think actual quotes, that's going to depend on so many things: client budgets, your cost of living, the demand for your services, production value of the end product, of course. How do you quote so that a client won't run away? That's another.
Every time a client asks me, they're like, well, how long do you think it'll take to do an hour of this or that, or 30 minutes? I never answer, because the answer is it's a question it's a big pet peeve of mine, is how we in our industry, whether you're working internally or externally, we want to put an arbitrary level of effort against a 30-minute course or an hour-long course. Well, that's stupid, because the variability of what can go into those 30 minutes is endless. Is it going to be custom graphics, stock graphics, audio narration, no audio narration, branching, or linear? I mean, there's just so many how many review cycles are you going to have? There's so many variables that go into that I just think it's a waste of time to put an arbitrary number on how long it takes to do 30 minutes versus an hour. So my opinion about pricing your services so that your clients don't run away, here, one of the fallacies that exists or a misconception about freelancing is that you set a rate and that's what you charge every client. And the reality is what I charge a client varies depending on how badly I want the client, the level of effort that's going to go into that course, how deep I perceive their pockets to be, or how much they're willing to spend on that course, how much I need at the time, or how much I really need the project. And my rate or how I charge for that varies depending on all of that. I could work with 2 different clients and deliver the same workshop. Let's say I'm doing a workshop, a 2-day workshop. And one client I might charge $12,000 for, and another client I might charge $7,200 for. It doesn't mean that there isn't integrity in pricing. It means that people are willing to charge what they value it at. And so if they value those 2 days of my time higher than what these people value it at, well, yeah, I'm going to take what they value it at.
Yeah.
And, so there's this fallacy that you have a rate and you need to charge. If you go Google online, like, what should I set my rate at? They're going to talk about, well, you need to calculate how much you need per month and your expenditures. And I don't like that, because it's focusing your rate on what you need to survive. Focus your rate on what you want to thrive at. And stay true to it. And so if I have a client that gets sticker shock based off what I quote them, here's what I don't do. I never negotiate on my rate. I will negotiate on the scope. So I'll say, well, this is what I charge for this work, so let's adjust the scope of it so that it can fit your budget. So stay true and strong to what you charge. And if somebody freaks out, well, then negotiate on the scope. That's what I do. And if we can't come to an agreement, then it's probably not worth my time anyways.
Nice. Great points. I think you touched a lot of really important parts about pricing. I'll say about that, I feel like I do fall into the arbitrary number trap a little bit, just because I want because again, that is how a lot of people think about e-learning in our industries. Oh, it's a 25-minute experience. It's a 10-minute experience. If it's over 25 minutes or over 30 minutes, I'm not interested in it, because that's how you get into that really trudgy, slide-based stuff. And obviously take whatever pays the bills for some people, but it's just the direction I've been trying to go. And I get some clients to reach out to me, I don't recognize their company. Based off of some red or yellow flags in the first email or outreach, I get the impression that it's not going to work on budget, or that they don't have a very large budget. So I'll just say then, oh yeah, generally for a 25-minute experience, and I have an idea of what kind of interactivity and stuff that looks like, but I just say it's going to be X $1,000. just as kind of like, oh yeah, if this is in the right ballpark, let's set up a discovery call. Because I kind of want to qualify clients, especially now when like I'm trying to focus on my content. I don't want to take on like typical market rate stuff, or people who are expecting, oh, can I pay you like $50 an hour or whatever it is? It's like, so that first email, like I don't even want to hop on a call. I only want to talk to people who are serious and have serious budgets.
Yeah, I agree, and I don't waste time. And this is for me personally. This is not how everybody has to operate their business.
Right.
I don't waste time with clients who can't articulate exactly what they want.
True.
There's going to be room for some creative leeway for me to recommend, but if they can't say what they want in one or two sentences, that's specific enough for me to envision it, maybe in my mind's eye, I just don't have time for that. I don't want to have to, because it presents a lot of risk. If people don't, like, I had one client, this was last year, they didn't understand that if I were to build an e-learning course for them, it had to live in an LMS. They didn't understand that because they've never done it. And so I'm like, I'm not the person for you, because I don't want to teach them how to host a course on an LMS.
Yeah.
And that's just my preference. You know what I mean? So part of it's figuring out what you want. I can't tell you how many times I've quoted projects thinking there's no way they're going to go for that. And they totally go for it, So
Yeah.
you never want to judge the book by its cover, but you definitely want to listen to those red flags before you go too far that rabbit hole.
Exactly. Yeah, good point. I like your last point about quoting something and you're like, they're not going to go for it, and then they do, because those kind of quotes, that's how I've grown my business. Because you land that work where you're like, this is what I would want to take this project on at. It's like, it seems so high the first time you quote a number, you're quoting 20 grand, whatever it is. And before that, it was like less than half of that. And they're like, oh yeah, like send me over the invoice for the first 50%. It's like, okay, wow, that worked. Yeah. And then I guess the last part about that question I wanted to add on, like, how do you quote so the client won't run away? Like, yeah, you quote the rate you want to thrive at, like Tim was saying. And if they run away, then they're lost.
One thing I do with my quotes whenever I present a quote to a client is I back it up. I mean, I explain like, well, we're going to do this many review cycles, and this is what I'm building for you. And so, I don't just say, hey, here's a quote for X thousands of dollars. Trust me. I present it in a way that justifies it. And so how you present it and how you back it up, it all plays into giving meaning to that number.
Right. And as your skill set grows, as you get experience giving the higher quotes, like your confidence is only going to grow. You're going to be more confident in the rate you're demanding, and you're going to want to charge even more on the next client.
Yep.
So cool. Good stuff.
Sure.
Lori in the chat commented on a client that didn't know the difference between illustrated and animated, and got frustrated that the characters weren't moving in the first draft of the module. So again, that's something else you want in the paper. I say no custom animations or storyline included animations, because obviously very important, or animations created with Beyond, no custom assets included. So being very specific like that in your contracts will help so much when you run into those kind of situations.
Yep, exactly.
All right. Here we go. Hi, Tim and Devlin. When did you know you were ready to leave full-time employment? What did you have in place for a safety net? This was asked by Chris, and I know we touched on it a little bit. Maybe,
for me, I knew I was ready when what I was doing 9 to 5 every day felt like a distraction from what I wanted to be doing. That's when I knew. So one of the things I did in my previous job before I quit and went on my own, this was the holiday, the Christmas break from Christmas. One thing I always do is I always take 2 weeks off at the end of the year. I take the week of Christmas and New Year's off. And so the holiday, that 2 weeks before this was at the end of 2018, before I quit in 2019. I took those 2 weeks off, and I had really, really bad week that week at work before I decided to quit. And so what I decided to do during those 2 weeks is I deleted my work email. I turned off all notifications, and I said to myself, okay, I'm going to put myself in the mindset of, what if I just didn't have this job anymore? I didn't have that money anymore. What if I just spent all my time working on my website, my brand, for those 2 weeks, and put myself in the shoes of what it would feel like to be on my own. And it was like the best 2 weeks I ever had. And once I came back to work, that week I had the conversation with my boss, who I was like, yeah, we need to start a transition plan. And, for me, it aligned really well because I was going to be getting my bonus. I had already been saving. I was, so financially those stars aligned, luckily for me. And I was able to negotiate um, an exit plan that allowed me to work until the end of March. So I would get my bonus and the finances that I needed to quit. So I gave a 3-month notice and we worked on that. And like I said, it goes back to being excruciatingly transparent. And my boss respected me for it. And so it was for me, once I realized what I was doing 9 to 5 was a distraction from what I wanted to be doing.
Nice. I think a lot of people may be able to resonate with that who are considering making this jump. I know, I was a master's student at the time. I was building my freelance business, and that last half of my master's program, I would just be like resenting all this classwork. The first half of the program, I'm like, oh, I'm learning so much. And then I'm like, why am I writing these school papers? I want to be writing content for my website. It's exactly like you said. It felt like a distraction from my business. I'm like, this is not what I want to be focusing on.
Yep.
So, great point. As far as safety net, yeah, I mean, we talked about having enough in savings so that you're comfortable. Cool.
Yep.
The best social media platforms to use and focus on?
I'm on Twitter and LinkedIn. I know a lot of people are doing Facebook. I don't, I have a Facebook account for my business. I don't focus on that. For me, it's LinkedIn and Twitter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. LinkedIn is definitely produce, I would say 95% of the results for me, if not even higher. But again, yeah, LinkedIn and Twitter, that seems to be where most of the instructional designers are hanging out. I know there has to be an instructional design presence on Facebook because sometimes I'll get a lot of traffic from Facebook, like as if one of my resources were shared on some kind of page, I'm guessing, but I'm not active on Facebook in the slightest. I would say LinkedIn is probably the number one platform. That's where I see all of the familiar names posting and commenting, and yeah, seems to be a lot of activity and traction there. So LinkedIn, and I have an article about that if anyone wants to up their LinkedIn game.
Yeah.
Okay, this is another pricing question. Probably don't need to dive too far into it because I think we hit this home. How do you determine your hourly rate? There are articles out there about that. Again, it is a bit subjective. What can you charge? How much do the people looking at, how much would the people potentially value the quality of work that you can produce? That's, something you have to think about. And then you may even go beyond hourly rate and start thinking about fixed pricing. That's my take on it. Yeah.
Yeah. It literally a shot in the dark. I mean, you pick a number and you go with it and you see whether or not if you choose to go hourly, whether or not that works for you. So there's no right or wrong answer. When I first started, I was charging $50 an hour. That was back in 2013. Then I went to $75 an hour thinking, oh gosh, nobody's going to hire me for that. And then a lot of people hired me for that. And then I went to $95 an hour thinking nobody's going to hire me for that. And then I started going to 125 and then 150. And then to your point, I'm now starting to go to project-based pricing. So
nice.
You pick a number and you experiment and see what happens. There's no right or wrong way. It's not about pricing for what you need, price for what you want. That's my takeaway.
Yeah, same experience. I remember when I was first starting and having these hourly conversations, I said 50 because that's like what seems to be the right point looking online. And before that, I was working part-time jobs in college, making like maybe $15 an hour. So I remember when I said 50, like my heart is racing and stuff. And then like a few months later, I'm like, I need to be charging more. And within a year, I was doing 125 an hour. So definitely can quickly rise as demand rises and as you're no longer comfortable with whatever you were previously charging. Because once you quote a number, like it's exciting at first, but very quickly you want to quote a bigger number to become excited again. Thing is, make sure you're constantly developing your skill set, your brand, and all of that stuff to actually back up the higher rates.
Yeah. Like I said earlier, the beauty is you can, as a freelancer, you can choose to make as much money as you want. You really could.
Mm-hmm.
It depends how much you want to charge and how much effort you want to put into it, but you can make as much money as you want.
Cool. Okay, I see a couple of more questions with above 5 votes. Okay. So we're gonna answer everything with above 5 votes. I'd say if put in those final votes if you want to see something else answered now. But I'm seeing we do have a few people dropping off. It is getting we're running a bit long here. Okay, so Izzy asks, are certifications helpful at all in convincing potential clients to hire me, or should I focus my time on a portfolio instead?
Portfolio.
Izzy, I think you know how I'm going to answer this. Yeah, 100% portfolio. Certifications, like stuff like that. I mean, assuming you know your stuff, assuming you're using Google and books like Tim Slade's book, the eLearning Designer's Handbook, you're using other resources at your disposal to actually learn your craft, and you feel comfortable that you can produce quality work, you don't need a certificate to tell a client I know what to do. Like, it's just like a little signal. And obviously universities rely on that. Same thing with degree programs and stuff like that. Like, people, you can try to get your credibility from a certificate program, but it's going to be probably 5% as effective as getting your credibility from a portfolio of solid projects that the client can imagine their logo on and say, I want this at my company. I want to pay this guy. Yeah.
I have a 4-year degree in criminal justice, and that's it. I thought about going and getting a master's degree, but here's the thing, especially when you're freelancers, nobody cares about your credentials. They care about what you can do for them right now. So whether you have 2 years of experience or 20 years of experience, if you can build in storyline and that's what they're hiring for, that's all they care about. So, no, I don't think you need it at all.
As he said, he figured that out over the course of the session. But yeah, good point. Cool. All right. And this last comment with above 5 votes, again, it's from Fakar. What type of clients should I pitch to rather than academic clients? I'm guessing you're coming from an academic background, but again, you probably have figured out the answer from this. Don't pitch to clients. Build your business and brand in a way where clients are coming to you.
Yeah. Does anybody in the world get one of those pitches from LinkedIn messages and go, oh yeah, I guess I never thought of that platform before. Let's set up a consulting call. Nobody does it. It's so, I don't know, like, I've never responded to a pitch email on LinkedIn or an email, and I don't know who that works on. So don't pitch clients. Offer enough value that they're pitching you for your time.
Exactly.
So, I don't know who in the world responds to all those LinkedIn messages that we get. It boggles my mind.
Yeah. And just one more thing on this, like, I feel like I've just started thinking about this in regards to everything. And maybe this is a good time to bring it up. Like, because of course it makes sense with the clients. And this is one of my very early realizations. I don't want to be cold outreaching on LinkedIn. I don't want to have to be worrying, where am I going to find my next client? So from the very beginning, I was like, yeah, I need to build up some sort of system where people are going to come to me. I didn't know at the time that was content marketing, but it's exactly what I was looking for. And I love it. It's much better than doing some kind of like landing page, like Google ad thing. And that works for some people, obviously, but I find purpose in the content marketing. But anyway, I feel like I've started feeling this way about other things, like SEO, for example. A very important part is like domain authority. Who is linking to your site? When I first started with this, I was reaching out to relevant articles saying, oh, I just wrote this big how to become an ID article. Do you want to link to this to help give value to some of your audience? And that did help me like rapidly build up some stuff. But now I just wanted to focus, like this instructional designer salary survey. Like I want to collect some data and put data out there so that other people are just finding it and saying, oh, this is valuable, I'm going to link to this. Mm-hmm. And like certain programs where you have to like apply to be recognized. I'm like, again, I'm taking it to an extreme. This is just my take. I'm sure other people might want to do this differently. But even conferences, like I'm kind of over that too. I'm like, I don't want to even apply at conferences. I want to work hard enough over however many years, and I want them to come to me. So that's how I've been taking this to extreme, especially over this last few months, and I've started seeing the effects of like building your expertise. But yeah, I just want to be able to focus my time and effort on stuff that's going to help the community, not spend 2 days on an application so that maybe this person will deem me authoritative, deem me interesting enough or whatever it is. Because you can produce content for free online, just a little whatever.
I think it totally makes sense. I mean, I recently got reached out from an HR magazine. They wanted to feature me in a Q&A. And then they wanted me to pay them $3,000 to be, and I'm like, why would I do that? Or I'll get reached out by an organization who wants me to speak at their organization, but then they'll want me to submit like a 5-page application. I'm like, no, I don't have time for that. If you're going to reach out to me, you clearly have thought I'm already qualified, so let's just cut the BS and get to it. So I totally agree with you on all that.
Yeah, I haven't talked about that in a public space. Yeah, I've just been thinking about it a lot over the months, and that's like my latest attitude. So who knows how it will change over time, but that's how I'm feeling.
Yeah, I agreed.
Cool. All right, let's see. Done answering that. All right, those are all the questions with above 5 upvotes. Oh, and we're coming up on an hour and a half, so I think the timing is perfect. Tim and I think are pretty accessible and out there online. I'm sure you get a ton of outreach, but I think there's no harm in probably shooting Tim a message or something and reaching out.
Yep.
Again, if you enjoyed the talk, Tim has the eLearning Designer's Handbook. I'm sure a lot of you already have read it or have it on your bookshelves, but definitely check it out. Tim, I know you're active on LinkedIn. You're producing content on your website. Is there anywhere else that people should follow you?
Right now, just timslade.com is good.
TimSlade.com. You heard it from Tim Slade himself. All right, cool. As far as for Crowdcast, I think next week I'll do another storyline workshop. But yeah, thank you everyone for coming. Put some applause emojis in the chat for Tim. And the replay will be available as soon as the session is over for anyone who missed the beginning. So thank you, everyone. And I will see you next time. Bye-bye.
Thank you.